welcome to CMX Connect Denver's September event, Podcasting for Community Managers, with the one and only Brianna Jovahn, MBA. Wanted to tell you a little bit about podcasting. Podcasting is a very powerful strategy for creating meaningful connections and engagement in communities. Here we are today with Brianna Jovahn. She is the founder of What's Good Productions and the What's Good podcast platform, a media company and training platform for new and aspiring podcasters. Through her podcast and production agency, she motivates and supports individuals to pursue their passions and make a positive impact in the world. Brianna is joining us today to talk about podcasting for community managers. So thank you for coming, and I'm going to bring Brianna up to the stage, and there will be plenty of time for Q&A after she presents or during if you so desire. If you want me to ask a question, type it in there if in the chat. If not, just say I have a question and I'll call on you. So without further ado, let's bring Brianna up to the stage. Welcome, Brianna.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today with the presentation. Thank you, Miss Lori, for also inviting me. I just absolutely love you, and I just love how big of a heart that you have. So thank you so much for having me. And again, let's go ahead and get started. Well, I do have a disclaimer before we get started. I am very goofy. I like having fun. We'll get into that a little later, but this is very interactive. If you want to talk, let's have a discussion. We're just going to have a good and fun time. So I'm going to share my screen to get the presentation together. And if I can get a thumbs up, because I can't see you guys anymore, to make sure y'all see it.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Okay, great.
Looks good.
And I'm going to hit present. And are we still good, everyone?
We are indeed.
Awesome. Okay. So as Miss Lori mentioned, today we're going to talk about the power of podcasting for community managers, why you should start podcasting today for your brand and or business. All right. So the topics that we're going to discuss today is we're going to do an introduction, of course, of me and podcasting. What is podcasting? The benefits of it, why you should start one, steps to get started, promotion and engagement, conclusion, and then we're going to have a Q&A. All right, so a little bit about me. I know a lot of times when people meet, they want to just talk about their jobs and say, oh, that's who I am. I'm a this, and that. Well, I am total opposite. I like to actually talk about me. And so, of course, like I mentioned, my name is Brianna Jovahn. I am an auntie. I am a lover of wine. I am now trying out French wine, so that's really exciting. And I think I'm here on earth to just really help people where they are, just to meet you where you are and just help with any type of resources that I may have. I was in my head a lot just thinking about my purpose in life. And I really do think that my purpose in life is to serve others. A lot of people always say, Brianna, you always have a positive attitude and you're always smiling and this, and that. And I think God gave me that gift because I should share that with others so that can trickle down and just go to everybody. I'm not saying that I'm the start of it, but wherever I am in life, and if I meet you, I just want to make sure that if you're having a bad day, that I can turn that around and just be there to support you however I can. And so my background, how did I get into podcasting? So I was living in Houston for about 5 years, and I always talked to a few of my friends just about joining the radio. A lot of us, of course, going to college, we always had an idea of what we wanted to do, how fabulous our life is going to be. And I just thought that those conversations were amazing and I wanted people to hear them. Of course, I got distracted being in college, doing a little bit too much partying. So it fell through and we did not actually launch it. But what happened, unfortunately, I had some family members that passed away. It was my grandma, her sister, and I'm a big family person. And so my mom had asked me, what are your plans when, now that you graduated, you got your first job, you sound like you don't even really like your job. So what's the next step for you? And she kind of challenged me because I really did not know what the next steps for me were at that time. So I decided to pack up. I quit my job and I headed back home. Like I mentioned, I'm very spiritual. And so I got a journal out. I started praying, started going to church, and just was really looking for what my next steps were and just getting clarity. I'm a big person on clarity. So I was like, God, just please reveal to me what's next. And it was kind of like a full circle. I found myself always going back to Houston all the time. And I'm like, why am I going back to Houston? Of course, friends were there, but I was still being distracted. So God sat me down and pretty much just showed visions of, a microphone, me using my voice, sharing stories and interviewing people. And after a while, of course, me being a student, I created an entire presentation of what it would look like for me to actually start a podcast. I was going to have a co-host, but unfortunately, life happens. But she actually gave me the name for the podcast, which we'll talk about that soon. But after just sitting down and just really figuring out what I wanted to do, podcasting was kind of new back then, but at the same time, there was so many resources, and I legit created a full-on presentation of what I wanted the podcast to be about, who I wanted to talk to, and the surrounding of it being Dallas. And then from there, I found myself not going to Houston as much and just really diving in deep on podcasting. So, with that being stated, that was the birth of What's Good podcast. So I with the presentation that I created, I sat down with who I wanted as my co-host, and I was telling her, showing her the presentation, based on what the vision of the podcast for me, I wanted to sit down, talk to local business owners, talk to creatives, talk to bloggers, all of that makes Dallas great, because I am from Dallas, Texas. And I wanted to share that because me being in Houston, I was like, I have no idea, because that was my grow up years. I got my car, everything happened to me in Houston. So when I came back to Dallas, I was very much so lost. So I was like, I had this vision of the podcast, and I'm new here in Dallas as now I'm a grown adult. How can I put those together? And that's where it came about of me, figuring out who's a who that's in Dallas, sitting down, talking to them, and understanding their story. A lot of times we try to focus on these big enterprises and these huge, corporations and organizations. Why not figure out who's in our backyard? A lot of times we feel like it's impossible to reach certain people, but I wanted my podcast to be the bridge, because if I'm lost and I live in this city, I'm sure somebody else is feeling the same way. So why not create a community to just bring people who don't really know what's going on in Dallas, for the people who are in Dallas that know everything that's going on? Let's bring them together and make a community. And that's why it's called What's Good Podcast. So it's like what's good going on in Dallas. So from there, I was able to make new connections. I found myself going to different events. People were inviting me to different events. I was able to actually do a panel for my first time with no media experience. I actually have an accounting background. So all this was new, but I was putting myself out there, just being vulnerable and just really meeting new people. And I truly, truly enjoyed it. This photo that you see on the bottom left are actually my closest friends at my very first event. I had everybody that was on the first season. It was called The Wrap Up. And if they did poetry, sing, if they had their own business, it was pretty much like a showcase, and we had vendors around. So not only can you hear and see the people on the different podcast directories of who were on my podcast, but I wanted to actually take it that step further so people can meet them in person. There were so many people that just came to me like, "You're Brianna from What's Good," and this, and then I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Oh, this episode was good, and I'm so happy they shared this and this and that." And in my mind, I was like, how can I connect these people? So, like I mentioned, I'm always about connecting. I'm always wanting to be the plug. So for me, this wrap up event was everything and more because it solidified like I am really a podcaster and I'm really out here making new connections and hoping that this can provide resources to people wherever they are to just elevate or be inspired and actually execute on these goals of whatever they want to do. If it's starting a blog, if it's starting a podcast, whatever the case may be, I just want them to get started. And hopefully through these stories, they are being inspired. So, with that being stated, if you guys want to come off of mute, I just want to know your definition of podcasting because there's so many different ways to look at it. So, what is like when you hear podcasting? What does it mean to you? Anybody? Anybody?
I think you kind of nailed it when you were talking. You said, connecting, networking with other individuals that share similar views and values, and just, helping those individuals reach further than they normally would just through their own means.
Awesome. I think that was Cassie. Thank you so much, Cassie. Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Brad. I got one. I
Hey,
think it's
Brad.
about, hey. I think it's all about connecting people. Like, that's my big thing. It's like when I feel like I'm listening to a podcast, I feel like I'm really like sitting next to the person who's speaking. And we're like, it's kind of really, really weird. I've actually became friends with a couple of podcast people that I listen to in real life, which is like a crazy story. But it's like, I feel like I'm already their friends the moment we meet each other. Obviously, they don't feel that way because they don't know me. But like, I feel like, it's like, I already know you. And they're like, nice to meet you. So I just think it's like that connecting people portion that I really, really, really enjoy.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this, Brad. I really appreciate it. All right. So, you guys are both right when it comes to podcasts. And it's a time, of course, is to amplify your voice wherever you are. If that's through audio, if that's through video. And we're going to talk about topics in different genres, but it's pretty much just connecting with people. You only can connect with so many people when you go outside and go to work or go out to a park and things of that nature. This is beyond of just like who you can touch. And so that's pretty much what podcasting is. It's like a broadcast in a sense of through audio and video and through the topics that you discuss and just touching those right people based on those topics that you want to discuss on your show. All right, so let's talk about the benefits. As mentioned, you can actually reach a global audience. Right now, my podcast is on pause, but I went to go and look at my stats the other day, and I saw that people in Germany are listening, people all over in the United Kingdom were listening. I was like, wow. It's like when you research podcasts and you see and you hear that, oh, it's a global audience, but actually seeing it for yourself, when you look at your stats, it's a worldwide reach of who you can touch, who you can talk to, and people that actually relate to you because they're going to continue to come back and wanting for more. And as mentioned, it's easily accessible from your phone, your browser, wherever you are, you can pretty much access a podcast. Also, you can establish yourself as a thought leader. If you're an expert, and well, let's take that back because I know that's pretty cliche of saying that you're an expert. If you have a topic that you are very passionate about, that pretty much makes you an expert in what you do. I always tell people within my course that when you create a podcast, think about a topic that you can go on forever. And a lot of people say, well, my kids or my job or, technology or whatever the case may be. Some people even talk about brunch, they can talk about that all day because their biggest thing is to go to different brunches within their city or even when they travel. So any thing that you feel that you are passionate about, be a leader and be an expert in that. Because from there, people are going to say, oh my gosh, like I see that they're talking about this. Let me see if can go there. And then now they're being inspired to go to these different places. Let's say if we're talking about traveling, you say that you are the biggest brand for Thailand. Now, when people want to go to Thailand, they're going to reach out to you to say, hey, what are different places for me to go to while I am there? Now you've created yourself as an expert because you were so passionate about that particular topic. Now people are reaching out to you to learn more and gain more. So now you've pretty much established yourself as a leader within that topic. So as I mentioned, certain things that we may imposter syndrome, right? A lot of times where we feel like, oh, can I talk about this? Or are people going to tune in and things of that nature? As long as you're passionate about it, somebody else is going to have that same passion and they're going to hear it in your voice and just know how much you love that certain topic. So from there, you're going to be a leader in your niche. Another one is to deepen the audience engagement. My biggest thing, and I always tell people, is to be vulnerable. When I first shared my story of being a podcaster and people understanding of how What's Good evolved, when I tell you so many people just poured into me, it was beyond. So for an example, a good friend of mine, her name is Becky. She had told me about this branding contest. And I was like, I don't know if I should because I'm just a little small podcast in Dallas. I never thought anybody would take me serious because let's just be honest, there are so many other organizations and corporations that's doing more in the community. Well, at the time that I thought of me just being a little podcaster. So either way, she really encouraged me to just submit my information for the branding contest. They were saying, what's your story? Why did you want to do the podcast? Well, at the time it was, why did you want to start your brand? And I submitted and sent all of my answers to the questions, and I ended up winning. It was a blessing because the person who won, they asked, what would you like? And I told them, I don't know. I never thought that I was even going to get this far. And the question that he asked me was, would you rather have money to go to the actual studio where you record your podcast, or would you rather invest in yourself? And it clicked in my head the way he phrased it. Would you like to invest in yourself? I said, you know what? Let me invest in myself. And he bought me all new equipment for my podcast. And I'm actually using the microphone now that I got several years ago through that contest. And so it's important for you to be vulnerable and really share your story because you never know who's listening. You never know who's watching. You never know the different opportunities and spaces you can walk into just for having a podcast and just being who you are. And so for me, when it comes to the base of creating a podcast, really figure out your passion, those topics, really take that time to peel the onion because it's important because you're in this for the long haul. You want to be here to not just get started, but see everything come to fruition of what your why is and why you wanted to get started. Have those things as a reminder because those are the things that's going to build your community. People are always going to want to tune in. People are going to want more from you. So it's important to understand why you want to get started and where you want to go with it. And so another thing is it's multitasking and it's the convenience of doing it. A lot of times when people are listening or watching a podcast, let's just talk about listening, right? People listen in their cars. People listen as they're watching their kids or cleaning up, sometimes even in the shower or even working out. So it's very convenient when you have a podcast because that's another reach that you can get to people. And let's say, I think it was the Mercury retrograde. There was a lot of different platforms that shut down. Your podcast is still going to be available. If that's through YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, whatever the case may be, these different platforms are consistent and will allow your brand to still be heard. And so the multitasking and the convenience about it is so important, and it's definitely a benefit versus other different ways to get your brand exposed to other people. All right, so humanize your brand. Again, it goes back to being vulnerable. You want to make sure that you showcase everything about you. I know there's certain times that, hey, I don't want to talk about this and things of that nature. If it doesn't make you comfortable, great. You don't have to do things that make you uncomfortable. But if you're having a bad day and you, excuse me, and you kind of turned it around and found a solution for it, share those stories, because somebody else could be having a bad day and your solution could help them see the other side of it. And so there is always pros and cons to it, but just be comfortable with being vulnerable, because people want the human side of you. People are not going to want to listen to a robot. People are not going to want to hear you ramble either. So if you come with good, concise content that can really resonate with somebody, because you're not the only one that's going through it. People are yearning to understand how to get through life. They want to know the tips. They want to know the tricks. They want to know the pros. They want to know the cons. So if you have that information, just let it flow. I always tell people, let go, let flow. And that's another thing with this. It's you, your microphone, and whatever platform that you use to record, and just press play and give it your all, because that's what people are buying into, is you. So another benefit of podcasting is to diversify your content strategy. So when people hear this, they're only thinking, okay, I can only just podcast, but you can also create blogs from it. You can create video content. So initially podcasting was just audio, but now you can also do visuals on YouTube. So as we know, a lot of people want to see versus hear. There's different ways of learning things. So you can create little small snippets that would have like the captions. It's called an audiogram. You can put that on social media. You can pull quote cards from the podcast and put that on social media as well. You can also do maybe lives as a part 2 of what the conversation was. So you can continue to keep the conversation going and the engagement going to continue to build your community. So there's nothing wrong with repurposing your content. Somebody told me that I needed to go ahead and re-release an episode because they really enjoyed it. And so I re-released it, and I saw that, of course, the numbers were going up and going up, going up. And I'm just like, wow, I never really tried that before. But I just wanted to say there's nothing wrong with repurposing your content in different ways to continue to grow your audience. All right. So now we're going to talk about steps to starting your podcast. As I mentioned, you want to go ahead and choose your niche and your format as the very, very first step. Think of something that you can talk about for hours and hours and hours long. There's so many different layers to us as individuals. Share that with your people, but focus on maybe 1 or 2 in particular that kind of coincide with one another, and continue to have those conversations, because what you can do is invite guests to come on your show to talk about the same thing. As long as your brands match one another and your audience match as well, it's really good to bring on another person on your show. Sometimes if you have a co-host that's consistent, great. But even on just bringing a guest on the show, that's awesome as well, because now you're tapping into their audience, which will allow you to continue to grow your community. So definitely focus on who you are as the host and what you want to present. Figure out who are the people that you want to talk to. If it's moms, people that are transitioning, nesting moms, I'm just thinking about the different podcasts I'm working with now. They have graduated from college and now they're starting their life as like the second act. I've seen people, it's called pivoting. So if you start, that's kind of like me. I was an accounting major and now I'm in media. It's kind of pivoting to a whole different transition in life. And so what can you discuss and what people can actually receive from your podcast? And it's that value. What is that value add you're going to give them so they can take away and also receive action and tips on how to move forward? So think about those things when you're creating your niche in your format for the podcast. And like I mentioned, you can do interviews, you can do solo and start telling stories, you can do educational podcasts. There's so many different things that you can do. Also, plan and create. A lot of people, they think they have to step by step, verbatim, write an entire script. I'm going to give you a visual of what I think is the best way for you to do a podcast. So, back in ELA, English Language Arts, you would have your intro, your body, and your conclusion. Think about this as well when it comes to creating the content for your podcast. Just provide a little bit of tips, a little bit of tricks, and that will help you from beginning to end on how to deliver your message. So, for an example, I'm going to talk about my presentation today. I have a little bitty bulletins just to remind me of what I want to talk about so it can still get me through the presentation. You can do this for the podcast as well. Your intro, pretty much introducing who you are. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode. Today, we're going to talk about A, B, and C. Let's get started. So from there, you're quick and easy. The audience already know what you're talking about. You've already done your introduction. And then from there, you get to the body. From there, you talk about what that A, B, and C is, maybe give some tips, maybe give some tricks, and then you're done. And then after that, when it comes to the conclusion, give a summary of exactly what you talked about. Give them a call to action of how they can find you, how to continue engaging with your podcast, with you as a brand. If you have a newsletter, provide all that call to action. And then from there, thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate your support, and we'll talk to you next week. And that's pretty much a solid episode. So just give a good intro, the body, which is pretty much what you want to give them, and then give some takeaways. And then as the conclusion, summarize everything. And then you're out, give them some call to action and say, hey, we'll see you next week. So setup, recording, and editing. You want to make sure that you have a good quality microphone and headphone when it comes to recording your podcast. A lot of times people don't use headphones, but it's important, especially if you have more than one person that's within your podcast, to have a microphone, because you don't want any echoing. You don't want to hear the next person on your microphone and all this extra stuff. So it's important for you to go ahead and have headphones. And nowadays, if you go to Amazon, if you put like podcast kit, you can pretty much find the microphone, headphone, it's maybe a recorder to go with it. There's so many different softwares now to where it comes in an entire kit. Now that podcasting is growing, it's booming, and it's banging, you can go to Amazon, put in podcast kit, and you can get everything in one. I would always say and recommend check the reviews, because I'm a big review person. Somebody got on me the other day. They was like, oh, you're such a stickler. I like to know what I'm getting myself into. So read the reviews. But there are so many different options when it comes to podcast equipment. And I also have an ebook. If you guys want that, I can send it to you. I'll send it to Miss Lori, but they're really easy. Now you can start on your phone as well. If you have like a phone, you have your microphone that goes to your headset, you can use that as well. But get started. Don't take too much time and thinking too hard on it. There's a lot of ways for you. Pretty much probably have all the equipment that you need just to get started. Especially if you're doing solo episodes, it's easy peasy. Just use your voice memo. If you have, of course, an iPhone, but if you have an Android, that is called Voice Recorder as an app as well. And you can legit just click record and get started, and that's your podcast. So make sure, of course, going back to what we talked about earlier, plan it properly so you can have clarity and the people know exactly what you're talking about, so it can be quality content when you publish it. Another thing is hosting and distribution platforms. This is really, really big. So once you have your content, you've recorded it, you've edited it, everything sounds good, make sure that you have a hosting site that will allow you to put all of your episodes out. So now your audience can find and listen to your content. Two in particular that I really love is Simplecast and Captivate. And it's similar to a website. So what will happen, you'll take your raw audio. You've done your intro, you've done your body, you've done your outro, everything sounds good. Maybe you want to add a little background music, and I'll give you guys some more platforms soon. But if you want to add some background music just to make it pop a little bit more, you need to take that content and upload it to your hosting site. Once you upload it to your hosting site, you may need the title, the show notes, which is pretty much a description of the podcast, and also add those resources, those call to action links in the show notes as well. Once you click launch, you want to make sure that the hosting site works for you, because you don't want to, because I think a lot of times technology can push people away, because initially that's what pushed me away. I was like, I'm not good in coding. I'm not good at websites. I don't know what any of that is. So find a good hosting site, like I mentioned, Captivate and Simplecast, that will do the hard work for you. So when you click launch, they will go ahead and distribute your podcast to those podcast platforms and directories. And so, like I mentioned, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon, Spotify, etc. So the only thing that you should be uploading at that time is just the episode, the show notes, a cover art as well, because we definitely want to make sure that we have artwork. I would say use Canva. Now you can put in podcasts in Canva, and there's so many different templates for podcasting, which is amazing. So you don't have to work too hard for that either. But if you don't want to create anything on Canva, I would also suggest Fiverr. So when you create an account with Fiverr, find somebody that can help you create, branding templates when it comes to your cover art. So that's important as well. So we talked about cover art, talked about creating and recording your episode and launching it to a hosting site so it can get from you to now your audience. One thing I do want to also talk about is editing. Do not focus so hard on editing. Now there is a platform called Descript. I'm not sure if anybody's have heard of it. It's now becoming very popular, but you're going to edit your podcast as if you're editing a document, and it has changed the game. Literally changed the game. At a click of the finger, you can delete all of your your all those filler words. It will make it sound, your podcast, as if you recorded in an actual studio versus recording at home. Some people record in their closets, just whatever you need to do to make it sound good. But now you don't have to do that anymore. If you upload it to Descript, if you put studio sound, it will eliminate all the background that you have in your house, or if you do in the closet, whatever the case may be. It will eliminate everything and make it sound so good. You can also add in background music. You can also add in photos if you want to. If you want to put the audio on YouTube, you can make it a visual thing. So Descript is an amazing platform to do your editing, and you can also record as well. So I wanted to plug in Descript. But other than that, once you have everything polished, definitely choose a hosting site so you can distribute your amazing work to now your audience. All right, so promotion and engagement. As I mentioned, you definitely want to create eye-catching artwork and branding. Canva is a big thing for me. I am not, I must say and repeat that again. I am not a graphic designer, and I don't want to be one. I give it up to people who are very creative in that space. And I give you all the props in the world. But Canva has been a blessing to me when it comes to creating any type of branding templates, cover arts, etc. It will make you feel like you're a graphic designer. You're going to feel like, I did this. Who did this? Me? And so I definitely recommend Canva. If you don't want to do Canva, I would also suggest Fiverr. Fiverr is such a great platform to find independent contractors to help you along the way in creating your podcast. So if you want them to create those branding templates, if you want them to create the cover art, even editing your podcast, if you find yourself trying Descript and it's just not for you, it's okay. But what I suggest is create a budget. And I'm a big proponent on creating budgets. Create a budget of what you can do and what you can't do. So you can figure out, okay, I can handle this part, but I'm going to use this budget to outsource so people can help me to go ahead and deliver this amazing content to reach my audience. So it's important. It's very, very important to have your artwork, have your branding template, have all these good things in order so people can find your podcast. You want to look good so they can go ahead and actually click on a podcast and actually listen in. Because the first thing they're going to see is what the podcast looks like. So creating artwork and branding templates is very important. I also want to mention, a lot of times people question, should I get a website? Should I do the website so I can continue to look good for my audience? Nowadays, a lot of these hosting sites have websites attached as a part of the package, and it's free. So that's something else you don't have to worry about. In Simplecast, Their websites are amazing, and Captivate is amazing as well. So those are different things that you can think about when you're researching these different platforms to see what best fits what you're looking for in creating your podcast. So promote across channels. Of course, social media. I would also say, like we already mentioned, website. You can do it through the hosting site and email newsletters. I did not realize that I had a community until I looked at the different people who signed up for my newsletter. I was like, oh, wow. So not only are they listening, they're taking that next step to actually subscribe to your newsletter. So go ahead and get as many emails as you can. From there, you can maybe do giveaways. You can also do promotional giveaways, as in like a mug. I can show you guys one right now. Somebody actually created for me. What's Good podcast coaster. I'm not sure if y'all can see it, but it may be just showing the presentation, but I'll show you guys later. But yes, you can have so many different things to help promote your podcast, and also tease upcoming podcasts as well. Like I mentioned, there's audiograms, quote cards. There's so many different things that you can create as you are promoting your podcast. Also, do Q&A for taking it that step closer or taking it that step further and promoting your podcast. Get out there and let the people see your face. This goes into encouraging your listener to interact with you. Please, please, please be sure in those show notes that I mentioned earlier, add those links. So not only can they hear the podcast you say in it, but they also see it in your show notes. So they can go ahead and go to these different places where you're telling them to go. Because if you don't, you're missing out on an opportunity of actually building that community. So I would say create maybe a link tree to add all the different things that you do in life. I always say like link tree in my mind is like a tree, and then those different links are your branches. So definitely add everything that's a part of you into that link tree. So you can add that to your show notes. So when they click the link tree, everything that's you will all be in like a one-stop shop in a sense. And so also monitor your analytics and feedback. Initially, what I would say, this is also a disclaimer, don't worry about the numbers in the very beginning. I would say more so focus on the content that you're creating and being consistent in creating it. I would say that would be number one. Of course, you can look at the reviews, but not so much as the numbers, because the reviews, people want to tell you how much they love it and things of that nature. So I would say, yes, interact with people who are saying how much they love it. Maybe you can screenshot it and show it on social media, because that would get more people engaged. But in the initial startup of your podcast, do not focus on the numbers. I would say focus on the numbers later, because that's when you can start thinking about having ads on your show, sponsors on your show, and that's where you get to monetizing your show. Yes, this is definitely an option. A lot of people are like, what's the purpose of doing a podcast? You're just doing it for free. No, if you connect with the right people, they are going to share your podcast with other people, and now you're being promoted and people are going to be reaching out to you. How can we collab? And that's where the monetization comes in, to where, hey, can you show my product? Or hey, can you talk about my service? And you can charge a fee. Sometimes you can also even do a donation where people are just sending you money just to say thank you for sharing those tips and tricks. So that goes back to being vulnerable too. All of it is a full circle. So yes, when you start your podcast, stay consistent, start looking at those numbers. You can also share what those numbers are on social media. Like, thank you for allowing us to reach our first 1,000. Thank you for allowing us to reach our first 5,000, because people are going to be watching you and they're like, oh my gosh, people are really engaging. People are watching. Look at their followers. Like, this is a whole community. How can I be a part of this? And you can start putting a fee on whatever service that you guys talk about in collaborating. I know somebody reached out to me and we did a collaboration. We did a masterclass. It was like not a 1 hour, it was like 2 to 3 hour masterclass. And we split it up from beginning to end. It's pretty much kind of like this presentation, but it was times 10 and really diving deep into what podcasting is, how to get started, etc. And people actually paid us. Me and the lady who reached out to me to collaborate, we split the presentation from her doing the first half, me ending it, and we literally made quite a few dollars on it. So I was really excited. That was my very first collaboration. And it really opened doors to see how far podcasting can get you. So goes back, like I mentioned, full circle of knowing who you are, knowing type of content you want to create, planning it properly, making sure now, you editing it, making it polished, submitting it to your hosting site so it can reach your audience, and promoting it as much as you can, encouraging people to listen, encouraging people to take action, and also just really receiving the feedback that you're receiving so you can get better for the future, because there's so many opportunities that's going to come. So plan it is all I'm saying from the very beginning, so you can have all this planned and created, so you don't have to go back and be discouraged. Take time in that planning process, so when you get to these opportunities, you're just going with the flow. Everything is good. Of course, you're going to get better when you get started. Don't focus so much on it being perfect. Done is better than perfect. So get it done and just keep going and grow as you do it. All right. So in conclusion, I just wanted to show these photos. Of course, this was my first time actually hosting an event. This is me with B. Simone, actually interviewing her. I've interviewed Kirk Franklin, Fred Hammond, the list goes on. And I just want to encourage you guys, as far as in conclusion, podcasting can take you to so many different places, especially being community managers. You already have a community, but having the podcast itself, adding that extra as far as providing tips and providing different vulnerable stories for people to learn, not only through what you're saying, but also through your stories. And so it's important to just really show up, because you're going to be positioned in different places you never thought that you would be. And I'm just really excited about my career, to be honest. I'm not sure what's next for me, but starting a podcast has really definitely opened up doors just for me to connect with people, me teaching people. Of course, I have a course that I met with Miss Lori, and there's just so many different things. So once you create your podcast, create that content, see what different other avenues you can do with that content. Like I mentioned, creating a course, because that's huge. And it doesn't have to do with just podcasting. It goes back to that topic being discussed at the very beginning. What type of course can you create around that topic? So there's so many different avenues. And once you get started, I promise you, you're going to see the different opportunities that just going to come and flow into what you're doing.
Thank
Alrighty.
you so much.
Thank you. And so I'm just going to open it now to Q&A. Did you guys have any questions? I'm going to stop sharing.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead, Cassie. Go.
Oh, no, go ahead.
You go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you. I was actually going to ask more on the other side of the microphone in terms of guests. What are the qualities of the people that have been on your podcast that you feel made the best guest?
So for me, I have to do a plug for my cousin. His name is Jason Lyric. He was actually my first interview. And when I say Jason had started rapping way back in the gap, and I just love seeing his career, because he was very consistent in what he was doing, and he was very consistent on Instagram, things of that nature, just really showing up for everyone. So I thought he would be a great person because he was very open to sharing his story. Now, on the other end, I've had people who come on the show and they have a big following, but they were very close knit of the different knowledge and things that they wanted to share. And I learned my lesson. I would literally have to have a conversation with the guests first to see if we really connect. Because my thing is being open and just really sharing your story. If you're not doing that, then this may not be the best collaboration. So it's important to see how they move, when it comes to their content, to see the type of things that they're sharing with people. Because when Jason came on the show, he was showing people, how to, own their own masters, be independent, making sure that you have budgets. Like, he was really talking about the business side of rap. And so that's why I wanted him on the show, because he not only is this amazing rapper that's here in Dallas, but he also can share the business side of it to help protect you in the business. And so that's why when you get the guests, make sure that you do background, make sure you do your research, because you don't want them to get on the show and freeze and then you're like, that was a waste of interview. And so you don't want to waste your time. So have conversations, make sure that you do your research, and make sure that they definitely line up with what you want as far as like the information that you're giving your audience. Make sure that they line up together. So when you do launch the podcast or the episode itself, that they're getting that value, because they're coming to you for a value anyway. So you want to make sure that you get somebody that's going to share that same value.
Awesome. Thank you. I love the part you said about collaboration rather than it just being a guest and a host. It's more of a collaborative effort. So
absolutely. Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Brad. I have one. I've been trying to start a podcast for my community for, I don't know, about 6 months now or so. And the feedback that I've been getting from my leadership is what is the goal of your podcast? Because we don't want to be creating content just for the sake of creating content. Mm-hmm. And I'm in a pretty niche market for the community that I'm supporting. And I know that there's a very, very capable audience of people that are very, very interested about it. So I was wondering if you had any tips on like how to overcome that objection, or ways that I, with my leadership or my brand or my product teams, to help me build out the kind of scope of the project that I'm looking to complete with this podcast.
And so would you do like a solo, or would you do interviews? Have you thought about the type of format you want, or you're just open just to get started with the platform and just figuring it out as you go?
Yeah, no, I am very, very conscious about that. And my community is pretty small. It's like an elite program of like applications where we get like hundreds of people that want to be in this community. So I actually would just be kind of like a facilitator of like a host, in the sense of like introducing a new guest every week and letting really them share their story or their content that they want to really put out into the community. It wouldn't necessarily be like my content at all. It'd be more amplifying my community's message and content over to them.
Okay. So what I would suggest when it comes to this particular format, I would say research and make it clear before you bring on the people who's going to present their topic or whatever they're going to deliver on your podcast. For me, what I did with my show, I would send them questions. It's kind of like a questionnaire in a sense, to let them know, I'm going to ask you these type of questions. I want you to provide some knowledge. I want you to be open, because sometimes that kind of scares them, like, ooh, I really wasn't prepared to do this, this, and that. Or now they're going to come more prepared because they know this is the type of audience they're going to deliver content to. So definitely take time, Brad, in your planning phase, and really understand what you want as far as the audience. It's called the perfect avatar. What do you want them to leave with when they listen to your presenters? And then what type of value do you want your presenters to give to your avatar? So everything goes hand in hand, but just really make sure, because you're going to have other people on your platform, make sure you write exactly what you want them to do. Of course, they're going to be a span of different topics that they're going to discuss, but make sure that you add at the end of your presentation, we want to make sure that you deliver A, B, and C, so it can be communicated on both ends what you want from your podcast.
I love that. Thank you so much. It's great direction. And I'm definitely going to have to re-listen back to your answer just so I can write those things down. That was great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anybody else have any other questions?
Hi, Brenna.
Hello, hello.
Thanks for your presentation today. My name is Noelle. I have a question about what would you suggest for a community or community host manager for reaching out to get interviewed on podcasts? So I'm assuming it's a little more involved than just emailing the podcaster and saying, hey, I want to be on your podcast. Can you give us some tips or tricks or maybe just some insider info on what would be the best way to do that?
Absolutely. So it's called guest management. And this part is very important when it comes to doing the background check, as I mentioned earlier. When I am reaching out to people as far as being a guest, for one, you have to give them their flowers. Let them know amazing job that they're doing, how you found their content, if that's through YouTube, Instagram, and also mention it. I saw this live that you did and it really resonated with me because of A, B, and C. And I think this topic would be great for my podcast and I would love for us to collaborate. Just so you can, expand on it a little bit more on the podcast for us to have like a Q&A, etc., whatever you're looking for when it comes to that guest. So do your background, because what you don't want to do is just send a cold email to say, hey, this is my podcast. My name is this, and that. I would love for us to collaborate and things of that nature. A lot of times what I've seen just having discussions with people is, how did you find my content? Why do you think I should be a part of your podcast? So in that initial email, answer those valid questions, because if you're going to take time from their day to be a guest on your show, you want to let them know why. So take that time to give them their flowers, to say, I love what you're doing. You're doing it, and I would love for my audience to learn from you. And these are the different things that we can discuss.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Anybody else have questions?
I have one.
Okay.
What do you do when you get stuck for ideas? Do you ever get stuck for ideas, and how do you find inspiration?
Absolutely. So I did not mention earlier, but I do work for an agency called Growth Network Podcast. That is definitely a plug. They are amazing. And of course, I have my own clients, and I have found myself stuck right now, to be honest. I put so much into other people's podcasts, just coming up with ideas, and I get lost in the sauce of just helping other people, right? So I kind of abandoned my baby, what's good. And I was like, oh my gosh, we got to get back to it. So what I started doing as far as getting myself back out there, I started going back to events. And people were asking me, hey, Brianna, what's going on? What's good? This, and that. And I was like, okay, it's just a reminder that my show, for one, resonated with people and they're still looking for it. So that's one inspiration. And another thing is I started reaching out to my community of people just to get, of course, that inspiration of, you guys, I'm kind of lost. I kind of want to take a new direction on things, but I don't know what to do. And so just talking it out with somebody, especially that knows you, will also help you as well. Because I talk to my friends and family about everything, and they were just like, Brianna, you saw the good in what you were doing. Get back out there, and we need that. So it's good to talk it out. And also, like I mentioned earlier, I'm very spiritual. I journal everything as far as my thoughts. When I do my journaling, it kind of reminds me of why I started in the first place. And so it gives me, again, that inspiration to get started, because I'm already in my mind. I've already done some outlines. I've done some memos on my phone. So I'm getting back to actually launching my podcast again. But taking these different steps of talking it out, journaling it, getting back in the community of where you got started from, just giving you these little reminders and these different seeds being planted in your head so you can grow them and get back to it.
Thank you. That's a wonderful idea. Does anybody else have any questions as we're in our final few moments of the event? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Brianna, for an amazing presentation. Thanks to everybody who came. And check out. I put earlier in the chat links to Brianna's website and her podcast. And thank you all for your time. And we hope to see you at the next event. Feel free to reach out to her on LinkedIn as well. Take care.
Thank you guys. Have a great one.